What's Hazel in my blizzle? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. Welcome back to another edition of Soul Ramble Mode, where we have podcast-style discussions on smaller topics. In this particular edition, you've seen the title and you've seen the thumbnail. I had a little random thought earlier today as I walked upstairs, and I saw my copy of Sonic and the Secret Rings just kind of lying face down, because I have not touched that game in forever, and I don't plan to anytime soon, because that game is miserable. Not in terms of anything other than story, mostly. Or, no, I'm sorry, not story, gameplay. Story's actually perfectly fine. The gameplay I cannot stand, and if the gameplay is miserable, there's really no point, right? But I was really thinking about it, and we have talked extensively about what Sonic games deserve remakes and things like that. And two games that I obviously believe more than deserve remakes or remasters or some kind of ports are the Storybook games, which are Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight, right? And so I was thinking very hard about this, and I just wanted to talk a little more, in depth about those two games in particular, because those games really were the end of an era. Like, those games, it was Sonic and the Secret Rings before Unleashed, and then Black Knight after. And those games, despite how a lot of people may feel about them, are very important. And I feel like we shouldn't just let these games die out by any means, okay? And like I said, I know what I just said about the gameplay and things like that, which is why I think we have to go beyond remaster if we would ever want to see these games again. And I think I'd be more than okay with actual genuine remakes of these games, okay? And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why, okay? Number one, the legality issue when it comes to the voice acting situation and all that. We have had our voice actors for a good couple of years now, particularly with Sonic, obviously, because we've had Roger Craig Smith for well over almost a decade now, or a little over at this point in time, okay? And while I do love Jason Griffith and things like that, the legality issues that would come from him having to, I don't know what the legality issues would be, because he was the original voice of Sonic around the time of the 2000s or late 2000s, during that era of the Storybook games and Unleashed and things like that, right? So the hard part about that is that there's a lot of legality issues that would make it pretty hard for them to do anything with those games other than just leave them where they are, and people have to get those games through third parties and, still hope that you have a working Wii or a Wii U that can, since the Wii U is backwards compatible, to be able to play those games, right? And so that's another situation entirely with just legacy content in terms of every game, in terms of video games in general, that, we shouldn't be losing these games. But in particular with Sonic and the Black Knight and Sonic and the Secret Rings, I feel like, the only way we don't lose those is if we rebuild them entirely. And I feel like they'll be all the more better for it, right? Because the thing about those games is that, in particular, specifically Sonic and the Secret Rings, that was a game made during the rush period. Like, it is part of the reason a lot of people speculate as to why Sonic 06 came out the way it did, and that's because, during that time, Sonic 06 was being worked on and things like that. However, the Wii was also on its way, and it was on the uprising, and, they needed to get Sonic multi-plat, make sure he was on every platform as soon as humanly possible, because that's how they saw success with things like, Sonic. I think Sonic Heroes came out in like 2005, right? I gotta look back, but they were always about multi-plat, and making Sonic just accessible everywhere. It's in some way, shape, or form, and trying to get Sonic 06 to work properly on the Wii would not have worked out, so they kind of had to make something completely different entirely. And that is how Sonic and the Secret Rings came to be, right? The Storybook, the first Storybook game, okay? And now, here we are with this very gimmicky game where you have to use the Wiimote playing sideways. It's very heavily ingrained in the game that you utilize the gimmicks that they implemented. And that you move the thing side to side, you lean it forward or lean it back to go faster or move slower. To do any kind of platforming, you have to press 2 and you got to do certain things here and there. It's It's a mess. I don't need to tell you that the gameplay of Sonic and the Secret Rings is an absolute mess, okay? And that is really, really unfortunate because I don't hate the general idea or the designs of that game, right? The levels and the aesthetics, they could be sick if they had actual fun controls to utilize. The problem with the game is that Sonic is miserable to control until a certain point, until you actively get all of your upgrades in order and everything like that. But until that point, you are stuck with very bare bones, hard to control, messy, just unfun Sonic. And your speed is limited and everything like that, okay? And despite, decent level design and despite, the music being fun, even though it can be a little repetitive at some points, it does get a little frustrating after a while to have to continuously deal with that. And so, therefore, it's kind of sometimes a very tough game to get through. As a kid, I don't know how I did it, because there was a point in time where I did go back to try and play Sonic and the Secret Rings as a grown-ass person. I think it had to be just a little past high school when I got another copy and I played it again. I'm like, oh my god, I hate this. I could not get myself to get through that game. I managed to get through those first couple of levels, and then I got to the boss. Oh my god, what a miserable experience that was, okay? And this game isn't necessarily short either. There's just so many different side quests and things that you got to do. There's a lot to do, I mean, it is short, relatively speaking, but it's padded. It's a lot of padding, and it was just a frustrating and miserable experience. And so I'm upset that it turned out that way, because that game, as frustrating as I've come to understand it now, had a very special place in my heart as a young individual. So, I think about that game, and I really do think about the possibilities we could have with a remake of that game, with, fresh graphics, with, simply put, it's a very heavily level dedicated game. We could have a hub world or something like that, but in reality, this could easily be a quick little, couple levels, with the new mechanics that we're familiar with now. You know what I mean? Reinvent these levels, but with all of the new tools and, toys that we have in modern Sonic now, integrate a little bit of Sonic Frontiers in there. You know what I'm saying? Add a little hub world, add a lot more, dash panels and rail grinds and things like that, a lot of familiar things, but also utilize elements familiar from that game in a Frontier style, like the ledge dropping and the scooching on the ledges and things like that, riding animals, the little thin areas that you got to be really careful going through. But at the same time, I would absolutely be totally okay if we had this game with this level reinvented with the boost formula. I'd be over the moon to play something like that. Okay, and I do think that as a story, it's definitely very solid and it holds up very well. And I feel like, obviously we'd have to do a little bit of rewriting in terms of scripts to really, bring out the modern Sonic that we know today, for it to fit Roger Craig Smith's style. But I think that's okay. This is we're with a different Sonic now, and I do love Jason Griffith's Sonic, but I do also love Roger Craig Smith, and I feel like, with the right direction and things like that, we could still have the nice blend that we've always wanted with the really cool, edgier, hero Sonic that we've always known and loved from, that era of the 2000s with the hero Sonic and things like that. And I feel like we could have a really, really good remake on our hands with this game. It's especially fun for the first time seeing Sonic really put out of his element and kind of all alone, as opposed to our usual games where he's usually with somebody. I mean, granted, usually in the bigger Sonic games, you are just playing a Sonic and he is most of the time alone. But in our recent endeavors like Sonic Frontiers, he wasn't technically alone. He had everybody there. They were just kind of stuck. But regardless, they were there with him, as opposed to the Storybook games where it's other people entirely. They just have familiar faces because that's how Sonic interprets these people. This is how he sees them. So, I feel like we could definitely play around with doing something like that again, and I feel like that would be a really, really solid remake. I feel like that would be a great little holdover for us until we get the next major Sonic game in the franchise, right? And then I guess in that same vein, if we're going to acknowledge Sonic and the Secret Rings, we've got to consider the possibilities of Sonic and the Black Knight as well, especially because this is the game. This is the one that is even more important to me for a multitude of reasons. For one thing, this game was actually fun to play, right? Because the thing about Sonic and the Black Knight is that it was the idea, but played around with a little more and kind of like not necessarily perfected per se, because gimmicky Wii controls, motion controls that were forced down our throats was always going to be a little whatever, but it's definitely polished a little bit more than Sonic and the Secret Rings was, because they already had a general idea of how they wanted things to work by that point. So because Sonic and the Secret Rings served as a perfect test subject, we had Sonic and the Black Knight, where not only do the controls feel a lot better, but now we have a weapon to complement Sonic's speed and implementing all these different enemies on the screen that could, just give us all these cool combos and scenarios and levels and designs and things like that, okay? And Sonic and the Black Knight has been built up to be just such an entity, right? Because I think it is still easily one of Sonic's best, okay? In terms of stories, I think it is some of the strongest characterization we've seen from Sonic, the way he tries to save the main antagonist of that story, essentially, who actually turns out to be a great plot twist. I don't think I need to explain that, but regardless of that, I feel like that's some of the best that we've ever seen from Sonic, and I feel like people shouldn't be turned away from that. I feel like people should have access to see, the kind of Sonic that we grew up on, and, maybe a couple of rewrites here and there, but I think Roger Craig Smith has more than proven with Sonic Frontiers that we can definitely have that Sonic as well as the cool, goofy Sonic that we've known to come and love these last couple of years. But Sonic and the Black Knight was just such a solid and just raw concept, and I would just adore seeing that in a new light, in a new, freshly designed way, because we're at the point where people are still designing mods and like packs and things like that, and just completely from the ground up builds, and even just like they're modding stuff into like Kingdom Hearts 3 just so we can have Sonic but with that sword and actually be able to use it, right? Because people will make like mods and stuff like that for like Sonic Frontiers, and they add the sword to him, but he doesn't have any moves that require him to use that sword, therefore there's no animations or anything like that for it, therefore it's just an aesthetic. But I feel like we could do a little bit more than that, especially because Sonic and the Black Knight has proven him having a sword is badass and it complements his speed. It's such a sick concept. So I would love to be able to see that, especially because, I did see a video recently from Fidel Games Cage, and he was talking about how one of the things that the games or the movies, that the games could learn from the movies is that having more rival battles, especially in like modern current years, would be a very raw concept with the power that we have now, right? Because, you think about something like Sonic Generations, and that's cool and all, right? But like, we haven't truly had real rival battles like that in years. We didn't even have it in the re-release with Shadow Generations added on. We didn't have any rival battles, right? And the closest we had was with Mephiles. And I don't know, I feel like having a real, like, genuine boss battle with something more on Sonic's size of his power, his caliber, as opposed to just these completely, like, silent entities like the Titans. I love the Titans, don't get me wrong, but him battling against like Sir Percival and the other two knights of the Round Table, King Arthur and stuff like that, I feel like having something more grounded like that could be super awesome in a more modern setting with actual genuine combat implemented. I would love to see Sonic and the Black Knight with modern design and controls. That would make me so incredibly happy. You have absolutely no idea. I could definitely see those designs, even more so than Sonic and the Secret Rings, utilized in a more modern format, and I feel like that would be just so sick. A hub world where you can, upgrade your sword and things like that, where you can upgrade your gear, your arm, your, talking to Tails, or whoever's giving you your... I can't imagine they would switch up the story too much. That would kind of defeat the purpose. But, again, I just envision a lot of this stuff in, like, a modern way, and it just makes me so happy to consider, right? So, I would just love to see what Sonic and the Black Knight and Sonic and the Secret Rings, generally speaking, would look like in a modern way. But you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it from this one. But I'm going to go ahead and pass... Oh, whoa, that was crazy. I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to you guys, and I want you guys to tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that Sonic and the Secret Rings and Sonic and the Black Knight could be really, really well fitting in a modern style? Do you think that a remake could help benefit those games and we could really see them in a new light and they could be really, really fun? Or am I kooky? They don't need to be remade whatsoever, and that would be disrespecting everything and anything that they did to design those games to their perfection as they were. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yes sir, it does appear to be skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I would like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
Doing donuts in a bin. I stay funky. Battle goes wherever I is. I stay funky. I don't know who's ready to spit. Just know you're going down with my 58 clips. I stay funky. Honey's taking back to the crib. I stay funky. Get the club popped off like pain. I stay funky. I don't know.